You're listening to Artful Divorce, a podcast dedicated to helping you make sense of the divorce process. I'm John Kinney, a family law attorney, and I'm here to help you find clarity with practical advice and compassionate insights. Hi, I'm John Kinney. This is Artful Divorce. We are talking with Leanne Mercer, divorce coach, and we're going to launch into a little discussion about how to find a lawyer, what to talk to the lawyer about, and maybe some of the information to get to the lawyer. And let's start talking about. Again, we've been talking about those first days,
right?
What to do. So when you start to transition to think about, okay, I need to hire a lawyer. What was important for you? What was sort of a sort of criteria for an attorney in your mind?
Well, honestly, calling around and getting someone that would get back to me was important. I don't know if it was just a really busy season, but I found it hard to actually get a human being on the phone who could meet up. And for me, I wanted to keep the costs, realistic. I didn't want to spend a ton of money on a divorce. And my spouse also was amicable, and we didn't have a lot of child issues. So I just wanted someone I felt I could trust, that knew what they were doing and could execute it, what we wanted in a fair manner. So we ended up going with a collaborative divorce because we didn't have anything we were really fighting about. It was just taking care of the financial assets, and we didn't have child support to figure out. So it was pretty straightforward.
So do you think choosing the collaborative process sort of short-circuited any need to discern a lot when it came to picking a lawyer, because you have a set group of collaborative lawyers that you can choose from? So in other words, you didn't have to go through
the court system or
the vetting process that maybe a lot of folks have to do, right?
No, because that's true. We had agreed to a collaborative divorce, and that worked for us because we both agreed to it. Now that doesn't fit a lot of people's situation. So most people, if you have a lot of child care issues or any conflict to deal with in your divorce, collaborative wouldn't work. And I would say the downside to collaborative is if you agree to enter it, if you decide that you'd rather just went with a straightforward divorce, like the typical conventional divorce, you have to both leave your attorneys and get new attorneys. So it's kind of locks you in a way from a money perspective. Like a lot of people don't want to walk away from wasted, legal bills.
Right. Well, that leads me to a thought. To me, it's really important to try to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
Because if you end up getting 6 months, 8 months into a divorce, and you realize that your relationship with your lawyer isn't working, or there are things that are not going well, that happens. And there are quite a number of cases where litigants have been through one or even two lawyers. Starting over is expensive.
Yes.
And the new lawyer has to learn everything the old lawyer knew. And
right.
So you're doubling up on building up their knowledge base. And so you want to try to get to the right lawyer for you to start. And that's easier said than done.
Right.
So I have, and I think there's a time and place to talk about dispute resolution techniques, litigation, arbitration, mediation, collaborative law, all those things.
Right.
I think we'll get to that.
Yes.
I don't know if in this episode or not, but I think when you're first facing a divorce, you start to talk to people a little bit. We talked about reining that in a little bit, but you start to talk to people who've been through a divorce, or they know people who've been through a divorce, and you start to generate some names about people's experiences and those sorts of things. And I think that's somewhat helpful. It can be fruitful to start generating, this person was really happy with, their lawyer. Right. Sometimes I get a referral from the other side. So I might get a call from somebody that says, I came to you because my good friend's spouse used you, and my good friend, thinks that you were, effective. And right. That's a great referral to get, right? But word of mouth and generating that list is helpful, right. But it's really more of a patchwork quilt where you're creating a mosaic. You don't want to go with the first person that somebody says is great. Right. You want to really engage in some discernment. You never know when somebody says a lawyer's great. Maybe they just had a great case, great facts, and it seemed like it was great, but whatever they did was going to happen no matter if Zippy the chimp was doing their divorce, Right. And right. So you got to be careful about word of mouth referrals like that. And I think you want to keep talking to people and keep generating names. I have thought that state bar associations, and this is maybe a good time to say, our discussion is sort of related to Nebraska because that's where we're at. And we have to be careful, different jurisdictions handle, lawyers, and the expenses are different. Right. The hourly rates in different places are very different from Nebraska. So some of what we're talking about is localized, it's regional. But state bar associations usually have family law sections. Right. And the lawyers that are a part of that family law section of state bar associations usually are lawyers with a fair amount of experience and have good reputations and are engaged in, continuing legal education, and they're seen in their bar association as having competence and experience. I think there's organizations nationally, like the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. That is usually another source, another part of the quilt, the another patch, to start to create. And then you want to see if there's synchronicity, that if you want to see that there maybe the same name keeps coming up in all of the ways that you're trying to discern who to pick as a lawyer. You can go on lawyer review sites, but that's really interesting. I have lawyer reviews from names that I've never seen before. They weren't clients, but they reviewed me and gave me terrible reviews. And that's just part of the world we live in. Right. Somebody didn't like me and decided to put a review on it. And it could be, the janitor, that I didn't hold the door for, or something. And so who knows what you get when you look at review sites like, I think Avo and Google are probably the most prominent review sites for lawyers. You might, again, just discerning, you might look at those to see, of the names that you've already started to generate, what do their lawyer reviews look like? But man, take some of that stuff with a grain of salt. Yes. I don't know if people really understand that you can't do anything about a negative review. I mean, you can't take it down. You sometimes can comment on a negative review, but it's there for, in perpetuity. And it seems kind of wrong to give a negative review to an attorney if they weren't actually your attorney. Well, right. That seems... And the there's room for abuse for people, but it's the same thing as a restaurant. Somebody can give a negative review to a restaurant and never having been there because their ex-girlfriend went to work there and they don't want them to be happy. So it's one of those things where you just really have to be careful about the public and misinformation when it comes to lawyer reviews type things. Well, then there's advertising. Right. And if you research, like if you have a few names in mind and then you go to their web page and, there'll be other people's comments, you get to look at the reviews. And then I think you make an interview, like set up to meet them,
and see if they're a good fit for you.
Yeah, I think people get a little exhausted with meeting with 4, 5, 6 lawyers. They get tired of that, and so
you wouldn't want to have too many. Like narrow it down,
right? You
do have to pay to interview them too. So,
well, that's interesting. I charge an initial consultation fee, and I have people, who call, and when they realize that there's a consultation fee, they hang up or they don't make an appointment. And I think it's maybe a misunderstanding of, I don't really think I'm profiting or making a whole lot of money from initial consultation fees,
right,
because they're oftentimes quite a bit lower than my hourly rate. What I do with the initial consultation is I'm sort of creating a small barrier, and I'm testing whoever that potential client is to see how serious they are.
Right.
If I'm giving away my time for free, somebody might just be trolling me for information, and really not be serious about ever hiring me. And so I want whoever I meet with to be serious,
right, about their divorce
and hiring me. And so I create that hurdle so that I know whoever's meeting with me is a serious potential client. And it's not because I want to put $300 in my pocket.
Right.
My time is valuable. I've got a lot of experience, and I don't want to. All I guess I would say is that if you're out there and you're about to go looking for lawyers, don't turn one down because they charge a consultation fee. I think that's a good sign rather than a bad sign.
I think they should expect that.
Yeah.
Because, to be fair, the attorney, I'm sure a lot of people get to the idea they're thinking of divorce, and then they go see an attorney, and then maybe they go and stay married for another 2 to 3 years.
Right.
If you have to be serious enough for the next step to not waste their time either.
So what do you think about lawyers who advertise, divorce lawyers who advertise? How does that, what does that make you think?
I don't have a problem with that. I think it's probably a good idea to give people an avenue of how to get the names out there, because if people who've been divorced, it's not necessarily a lot of information that they've shared with you. People are pretty private and want to take care of their private business and go on their merry way. So it's a little trickier to see it like as a new restaurant or, to know who to go to. So I don't have a problem with advertising.
I have noticed, I think particularly when I drive to a different city,
the billboards.
Yeah. And it used to be almost exclusively personal injury billboards. And then I saw more and more criminal lawyers advertising. And now I'm seeing a lot of divorce lawyers advertising on billboards, and then there's radio and television. And I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that either. But there are, again, there are so many different ways to learn about lawyers,
right?
That advertising might draw you to somebody, but you have to go through that other discernment process. I would say that if you respond to an ad, get on the website and let the ad push you to the website rather than push you to making the consultation appointment.
Right.
And the website can, and oftentimes I think, can be significant and tell you some things. And what I think, and this is probably a very personal opinion, but if you're on a law firm's website and you can't find the lawyers,
right,
they don't have a bio, you don't, all you get is the name and, call us for a consultation. I sort of think that is potentially a bad sign. Not
right.
in every case, but there are business models when it comes to divorce lawyers and divorce law firms that sort of involve having a cadre of maybe younger, less experienced lawyers, and then there's a few more experienced lawyers kind of at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. And I just think it's important to know the name of the person that you're going to meet with, and know what the reviews look like, and whether they've been involved in any, some of the things, the signs of being a prominent lawyer in their field, like,
Right.
being involved in the Bar Association, the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, how many appellate cases have they handled? How many years of experience do they have? Well, if you're calling a law firm based on their website and you don't know who any of the lawyers are by name,
Right.
I don't know how you can know any of that. And so I think that there are some business models out there in the divorce lawyer field that you may end up with a very fine lawyer, but I would want to know who I'm going to see before I go in, and not just their name, be able to determine a little bit about them, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
Now, you short-circuited all that, right? You didn't really poke around and try to look at websites and law firms, or did you do that?
I went by word of mouth, like you said. I think that is a good way to asking people who have been through the process what they liked about who they retained or how they decided. And I interviewed a few different ones to see what would be a good fit for, the change for both of us. So I didn't do a ton of it because it wasn't there wasn't a lot of conflict. There wasn't a lot of resolution that had to happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about collaborative law. And I have told you offline that I think that the people who pick collaborative law are the same people who would get their case settled in a traditional litigation sort of scenario. In other words,
I think that's true.
And so you're already pre-selected in collaborative law. You're talking about people who are really trying hard to be thoughtful and I guess untie the rope instead of cut it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so, there are many, many ways to artfully divorce your spouse,
right,
with some measure of peace. I'm more of a traditional litigator. I settle most of my cases, but if you hire me, there's a potential for packing your briefcase and going to trial.
Right.
Mediation. Did you ever think about mediation at all?
We considered it. I think mediation. Collaborative sort of. They're very similar. The problem with mediation is, I think in Nebraska, then you don't necessarily have your own representation. If there's any power imbalance in your relationship, I'm not sure mediation's easy to navigate.
Yeah, I think mediation with two divorcing spouses with no lawyer representation can be very dangerous. The mediator's role is not to advocate and to be a neutral.
Right.
And again, like you said, power imbalance or even like information imbalance. A lot of times in a marriage, someone has a lot more knowledge about everything, financial, and so there can be real trouble spots there. I have found that the best mediation is when you're litigating, and you get to a point where trial is looming. You have your advocate, you have your lawyer, you've done discovery, you have learned everything about the assets and debts and income and expenses and everything else you need to know. Then you go to a mediator with your lawyer alongside you. That's much more productive and much healthier, I think, because you don't want to have to necessarily go to trial because, throwing everything at a judge in 3 or 6 hours or a couple of days is dangerous. It's a roll of the dice. And so I think mediation for parenting plans without a lawyer, it might be fine.
Right.
Because there are plenty of very, very experienced mediators who can work through parenting time issues and holidays and legal custody and choice, medical, educational choice issues. So let's just circle back to collaborative a little bit. The collaborative process is practiced differently, and it's almost like there's these collaborative groups all over the country that do it differently. And so depending on which group you're working in and how they're doing things, collaborative law can be different depending on where you're at.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think the collaborative law wouldn't necessarily be a good fit if you have, for having a very emotional divorce, because you end up, sometimes you just need to have space with your divorce from your spouse, and you kind of can't get that as much with collaborative because you end up having to talk, negotiate a lot more.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in, I think, a different episode that, if you aren't successful in collaborative, you have to, the two lawyers have to drop out. You have to hire new lawyers.
Start all over. Yeah.
There's another thing about collaborative that strikes me sometimes is, and that is I'm always curious about the marketing and how clients are routed through a collaborative group. Oh. And in other words, if somebody off the street calls a collaborative group, in the business world, let's say, for example, in real estate, people would call that a lead, right? And so how is that lead routed through the management of that collaborative law group? And is there somebody in that group that has sort of a stranglehold on the pipeline of the leads? And is that person practicing collaborative law with the rest of the group?
Right.
And then do those other group members become sort of dependent upon the person that has all the leads as to whether they're going to get a new case or not? And how does that power dynamic sort of work?
Right.
Now that's just, my own very, very personal observation. And I just think I would want to know what the dynamics are among the lawyers and how is business generated, because you wouldn't want to be in a 4-way meeting with your collaborative lawyer and them feeling like they need to be a yes man in negotiations because they want to make sure they keep getting cases referred to them.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, what are the dynamics of collaborative law? Now, I am sure that there are safeguards that could be taken, and I'm sure that I, don't necessarily understand collaborative law as much as maybe I should. But I think that dynamic is an important. You want there to be independence, and you don't want your lawyer to be anything but an advocate for you.
Right.
And so, there's problems with litigation too. You have lawyers that want to be gladiators, or they maybe fan the flames of conflict, and you find yourself involved in a divorce that you never imagined because maybe your lawyer's personality is driving, more conflict. And that's actually what these other dispute resolution mechanisms are designed to have you avoid. And so there's no perfect way.
No, I don't know why you have to start over if you decided to leave collaborative. Like, is that?
Well, I think the notion there is that in collaborative, you're supposed to have 4-way meetings where you share things that are confidential, and it allows for a more productive settlement atmosphere.
Right.
When that anything that you say can't be used against you in court someday, and that your lawyer or the lawyer on the other side can't go to court someday and know maybe some of your secrets or know some of your confidences. And so that's supposed to foster a better incubator for a divorce settlement. And so that's the idea, I think, behind that. And it makes sense.
Right.
Now, did you have a coach in your divorce?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No.
Did you have a suggestion made to you that a coach would be a good idea in collaborative law?
No, they do have, you do see a therapist, they have a mandatory hour, like a mandatory counseling.
Yeah.
But you see them separately from your spouse.
So we talked about this team, right? Having people there to help you. I think collaborative sort of creates that like automatically. I mean, that's part of the process. And so there is, I think, some benefit to having almost a requirement of sorts to create a team.
True. I think so. And I think every attorney could do that. You could do that with the traditional way too, where you recommend they see a therapist or.
I know that maybe not in Nebraska, but there are lawyers from other states who have actually listed on their website. They have counselors and therapists that are sort of part of the team.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure if that is allowed in every state, but there are creative ways to cook the egg, in a lot of different ways. And so I think there is a effort even in the litigation context to foster, a team approach, having a therapist or, even maybe a certified financial, I can't remember the designation.
Like a financial advisor to help you.
Well, there's a certified divorce financial specialist.
Right.
And I'm probably butchering the actual designation and the what it is, but I know that there's a financial planner designation just in the divorce context. Right. And so there are people probably in every state like that specialize in helping people with their divorce finances. And I think in a lot of collaborative groups, they're part of the team.
Right.
And you're supposed to go meet with one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's recommended too. And that's helpful because if people realize if you can center yourself and realize when you're getting divorced that it's going to take time and it's going to be a compromise. If you go the court route or the collaborative route, no one's going to get absolutely everything they want.
Yeah.
It's just, otherwise you're just going to be dragging it out and fighting. And you have to try to see how you're going to repair enough of a relationship for your kids, for sure, and maintain something healthy long-term. If the court system starts looking at divorce more as like a family transition, and how are people going to, over the years, handle this change, maybe it'd be smoother.
Yeah, I think that there are other states outside of Nebraska that involve custody evaluators, therapists in a much more robust way.
Right.
And I'm thinking of the state of Florida, for example. I've talked with some people who've litigated there, and there's a sort of a list of go-to therapists and custody evaluators, and I think it's much more regimented and regulated, which is very healthy and probably good. I want to mention arbitration. Arbitration is very typical in commercial disputes in terms of a lot of contracts have an arbitration clause where you don't go to court, you go to arbitration. And arbitration is not big, at least in my experience in the divorce world, although I think it's a burgeoning area. And just so people are clear, arbitration is sort of like hiring your own private judge, which is an oversimplification, but basically you don't go through the court, but you present your case somewhat like you're in court. The rules of evidence may or may not apply in the same way, but you are basically doing everything you do in litigation, but you're not in front of a person paid by the state.
Right.
You're in front of a private decision maker. And it's probably a quicker way to get things done. It's not super popular, but I think there are more and more very experienced divorce lawyers who are dipping their toe into arbitration. In other words, if you're retiring or you're very experienced and you might not want to go to court and litigate as much anymore, maybe you get a certification and an education in arbitration.
Right.
And you become an arbitrator. I'm guessing it's probably picked up in other states more than it has here.
And now it's specifically for divorce.
Well,
and
there's
child custody issues, I imagine.
I don't know. It's interesting you mentioned child custody. I don't think you could probably arbitrate custody issues.
Okay.
I don't think you could. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn there, but I'm not sure any arbitrator would want to have that responsibility. I think that might have to come from somebody who's on the state payroll. And so arbitration would probably be limited to financial issues and maybe your child support, alimony issues.
Right.
I don't think any arbitrator would want to be responsible for making a custody decision.
No, that makes sense.
I think we've talked about every conceivable avenue for how to manage a divorce. Let's just focus on the litigation context a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think I think a lot of people litigate and may eventually get to some kind of mediation, either for a parenting plan or for a financial mediator. But most people are going to be involved at least at the outset, are going to be involved in the litigation context, even though hopefully you never have to go to court, or
right.
If you go to court for a temporary hearing, you don't have to go to trial and that sort of thing. Just to put a cap on the whole looking for a lawyer thing, is there anything else that you can think of that you would do to try to find the right fit for looking for a lawyer when you're faced with trying to discern and trying to find one?
No, I think going online, word of mouth, and then if you want to try a divorce coach or get some counseling, like just to, and then do some interviews.
Yeah, I think one thing that you might contemplate is finding out before you go see the lawyer, like, how do they bill? It's not very popular in Nebraska, but there are a lot of lawyers who bill flat fees in divorces, and that's, sort of not typical. Normally you have the hourly billing system.
Right. And
that sort of, leads me into the discussion about, the hourly fee system and the divorce business, the business of divorce.
Yes.
And so we have this system where your lawyer has an hourly rate and they apply it to the time that they spend on your case. And you and I have had offline discussions. You're from Canada.
Yes.
And in Canada, they have this unique, if you have a dispute over your hourly billing,
your attorney-client relationship, yes.
Tell us more about that.
Years ago when I was living in Canada and I learned about that, I did go to law school in Alberta. So in Alberta, you could, if you had a disagreement with your attorney about his or her bill, you could discuss it with them. And if you still if you felt you were overcharged or had any, if he didn't make you feel better about the bill, you could apply for taxation. And then that person would have to justify their bill. So I don't think any attorney wants to be taxed, but it is at least the way that a person can keep things in check, because you don't, like with a big case of any sort, if you don't have any idea how big it could get, or if it seems like more than you expected, you have some power over your billing, which I don't know how it works in Nebraska, but
well,
I don't think they have that.
I also talked offline about how I know nothing about cars. And if I brought my car into a mechanic, they could give me a bill after, a few days or a week that I was completely foreign to me. And I would have no idea whether that bill was right, fair, and I feel the same way about clients. I think when they hire a lawyer, we tell them we're going to bill them hourly, and we give them monthly, hopefully monthly, right? Sometimes not monthly, but we give them bills. And I don't know how they would discern what you did, how long you spent on it. I mean, you can glean that from a bill.
Right.
But a client, layperson, is not really going to know whether you really did that or whether you needed to really do that. And so I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of heartache over lawyer bills in the divorce context, because many times it's the first time a lot of people have ever had to hire a lawyer.
Right.
And so it's all new and foreign to them. And so again, it underscores why you should really, really try to find the right lawyer to begin with, because you don't want to start over.
Right.
And it's really important to find somebody who cares about doing the right thing and being fair with you about your bill, and being open,
right.
And explaining things. Like if somebody wants to talk to you about the bill, you'll sit down and have a conversation, or you'll send them an email explaining why it took so much time. And I think there's a lot of angst for people. Like, again, we keep talking about those first few days.
Right.
Oh my God, how am I going to afford a lawyer? I just talked to my friend and they said their divorce cost $50,000.
Right.
And there's no way I could do that, and so how do you feel about having been through law school, maybe not practiced law so much, but been through law school and having gone through a divorce and knowing, how expensive it can be.
Right. I think it's good to, I think people so they're afraid to ask their attorney about their bill or how much things are going to cost. So earlier we discussed not using your lawyer's valuable time for things that they can't, at the rate. You could go see your counselor, you could talk to a friend, so when you do pick your attorney, be careful and mindful of how many emails you send, group all your ideas together, maybe only reach out once a month, record the times that you actually utilize them, and interview them and ask, what is the expectation? Be like, I have an idea. I need to have an idea of what this divorce would likely cost me. So just so people can be a little more prepared.
Yeah. So interestingly, every time I've given somebody a range,
right, then it didn't stay in there.
Well, no, the thing is people only remember the lowest number that you gave them.
Right. The range is tricky.
Right. And so, or if you try to estimate it, you can get yourself into trouble a little bit. And if you put a cap on it,
you don't want to exceed that.
You better not exceed that.
Right.
And then, I think it's important to give people some idea.
Right.
But a divorce is organic. You
Everyone's
may
a little
find
different.
Sometimes you don't know who the lawyer is on the other side. Sometimes your client's not telling you all of the different details. Things can change very quickly, and what seems like a $5,000 divorce can become a $15,000 divorce in a day.
Right.
And so you need to be.
Without the more flat rate divorces, it's hard to tell people.
Well, I've done flat fee divorces and I've done hourly divorces, so I know both sides of it. Yeah. And I have done basically the way you look at a flat fee divorce in my mind is I think of a kitchen remodel.
Right.
So when somebody is coming in to tell me about their divorce, but I think of it like they're coming in to ask you about doing a kitchen remodel, and the temporary hearing, the first effort, there's a flat fee for doing the affidavits and getting ready for the temporary hearing. And then 60, 90 days later, there might be a flat fee for doing what we call discovery, written questions, requests for documents, those sorts of things. Well, that's tear out and framing. And then there's another fee for drywall. And then there's another fee for finish work. And so you're basically bidding the divorce when you do a flat fee. Right. Sometimes you bid wrong, and so, but what does it mean to bid it right? Does that mean you're getting more, than you should? Right. The thing about getting it done efficiently and quickly is people will pay for that. They like that. Right. The only thing I would say about flat fees that people seem to really like is that your incentive as the lawyer is the same incentive that your client has. You're joined in wanting to be efficient, to be productive, to get the thing done as quickly as possible, right? Right. And so there's no, pushing the case, making it last longer, anything like that. There's no, again, you're just in the same boat financially. You're kind of both, have agreed to sort of remodel the kitchen together, and so it can be very reassuring to people to do flat fees. I would imagine, because then they know the amount, right? There's so much unknown when you're changing your family life and your relationship so much. Someone's going to stay in that house, someone isn't, and you don't have anything that and you don't really know your legal bill. It's interesting, just as an aside, I never have collection problems. Well, I shouldn't say never. I very rarely have collection problems with flat fees because people want to honor their contract. Right. They said, well, I signed up for that. Mm-hmm. That's fair. You told me what it was going to be before we ever got started, and I'm going to pay you what I said I was going to pay you. Right. In the hourly context, people sign an hourly fee agreement, but they feel very justified saying, well, I never agreed to pay you that, or I didn't tell you you should do that, or why did you spend 5 hours doing that? Which is fair, right? Because they don't know what they don't know what we're doing. The person who's disputing that bill feels very comfortable not paying it because they didn't sign up for that. Or you told me it was only going to be $5,000, and that was the low end of the range. Right. but that's sort of an interesting thing just in terms of mindset. Right. Clients are very have all in my experience doing flat fees, they're always very willing to pay flat fees, and never had. Back when I used to do only hourly, my accounts receivable was over $100,000, sometimes quite a bit more than that, meaning I had done a lot of work for people and they hadn't paid. And I do both hourly and flat fee now, but there was a time when I was just doing only flat fees. And during that time, I didn't have any accounts receivable. It was amazing. Right. People want to honor it. They know what to expect. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about this notion that when you're interviewing lawyers, maybe you don't bring everything, right. Maybe not to that first appointment. Yeah. Until you've decided to retain someone. That's interesting because I like to think about, okay, when you go to meet your lawyer, you need to have tax returns. You need to we talk about monthly expenses. Right. You need to have all that. And maybe that's just a lawyer's perspective because I just assume you're going to hire me if you come to meet me. But from a client, the layperson standpoint, you're maybe more kicking the tires a little bit. So you aren't going to bring all the information. No, I don't think you'd want to bring all of that information because you are interviewing the attorney that's going to fit you the best. So you can ask all the questions about billing and their experience with your situation, the time frame you're looking at, and then
you would have gathered up, maybe you have one or two that you've decided you want to interview, and pay the retaining fee and then see which one's a better fit for you. And then have all
you
the
mean
information.
the consultation fee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The consultation. Pay the consultation, but then, you're only interviewing one or two because you don't have time to interview 5.
Right.
So, if you have a good feeling about one, go with your gut instinct on it and have all your paperwork with you.
Yeah. Well, I think that second meeting with the lawyer that you've retained,
when you're going to retain them,
is something that we might talk about in another episode, maybe.
Right. Yes.
Because that meeting is super important, and
you can have all your information then.
Yeah.
Because you don't also want to hand out, like, you have your social security number on that information, and I don't know, everyone wants to kind of keep it private, don't have it everywhere.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good place to stop.
Okay.
We'll get back at it another time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Artful Divorce. If today's episode was helpful, you can find more information at www.artfuldivorce.com. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. For personalized legal advice tailored to your situation, consult a qualified attorney licensed in your area.